Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Mechelle Caindoy, and I am the business manager of Emerald Publishing based in the Philippines. And I would like to formally welcome you everyone to today's session. Now, I know that you're very excited to learn more information from the speaker today, but before we continue, let me just share to you some house rules. Please note that all participants' microphones are on mute and all cameras are turned off to ensure a better audio and video connection for the speakers. Participants can ask questions in the questions column in your control panel. And during Q&A session, I will read out selected questions and will invite the speaker to respond to that specific question. And relevant materials about this webinar will be shared in the post-webinar email after you attend this session. And attendance e-certificate and webinar video link will be sent out by GoToWebinar one day after the webinar. And please take note that the attendance e-certificate name follows the registered name. Now, the webinar objective, let me just share to you that this entire webinar, it aims to find out how the journal peer review process works and learn from the speaker a few tips to prepare for the peer review. And at the end of the session, you would be able to explain the importance of journal peer review, discuss the steps in the journal peer review process, and apply useful advice on the revision of the manuscript based on the reviewer's recommendations. Now, the speaker for today is an associate professor at the Faculty of Hotel and Tourism Management at UCSI University in Malaysia. He is also the chairman of Sarawak Research Society, aiming in nurturing rising researchers. And he is also the vice president of MAG Marketing and Asia Group Scholar, Asia Pacific, a professional chair in Polytechnic University of the Philippines. He is also an adjunct associate professor at Mingchuan University in Taiwan, a visiting professor at Methodist Pillay Institute in Malaysia. He is also an external member at Griffith University in Australia, a scientific board member and Research Synergy Foundation in Indonesia. He is also the founding editor of Journal of Applied Structural Equation Modeling, Scopus, Journal of Marketing Advances and Practices, Journal of Responsible Tourism Management. He is also the managing editor of Asian Journal of Business Research, Index and Scopus. He is also an associate editor of Young Consumers, Index and Scopus, and ESCI. Now, he is an editorial board member of numbers of international journals, Index and Scopus, ESCI, and etc. And these are the British Food Journal, Journal of Consumer Behavior, Journal of Global Marketing, and a lot more. He guest edited Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Research, Journal of Consumer Behavior, Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Technology, British Food Journal, Young Consumers, and a lot more. He has won Best Paper Award 9 times and a Young Researcher Award in 2014, and also an Emerald Literary Awards way back in 2018. Currently, he is serving as a brand ambassador of Emerald Publishing in East Asia. Without further ado, let me just introduce you our speaker for today, Dr. Hiram Ting.
Thank you, Mechelle, for the introduction. It's a privilege to be invited by Emerald Publishing and to be speaking to all of you, wherever you are. Good afternoon. My name is Hiram, and I will get started right away. Now, these are some of the journals which I edited. I'm still editing a few special issues. These journals and special issues allow me or provide me with necessary experience to write and publish. And also, we will be discussing about peer review process. So it is not something that we learn overnight. Even though miracle does happen, it doesn't really happen with peer review process if we do not write, if we do not do necessary preparation. So if we move on to the next slide, I will be spending roughly 10 minutes to talk about the peer review process. And I will spend the remaining 50 minutes to share with you my experience, to provide some recommendations and tips. Hopefully, some of those recommendations and tips will be useful to you. The reason I only spend 10 minutes on peer review process per se is because different journals might have different procedures. However, in general, it is very similar, and you can easily find information, submission guidelines, and that includes peer review process in any established journal, for example, Emerald Publishing. So I will not be talking too much about the nuts and bolts of the process. But let's look at what peer review process is for the next 10 minutes, as this is what we are here for. If you look at the slide, it is a very standard and systematic process. You submit if the paper is not a good fit of the journal's aims and scope. And I will be talking about why the paper is rejected right at the beginning. Then this paper will be thus rejected, as you can see in the diagram. If this paper fits the journal's aims and scope, the editor likes it, the editor believes that this paper would advance the knowledge in a particular domain, in that particular discipline, it will be sent to peer review process. So many times people ask me how long it would be. Again, it depends. In general, it will take 1 month, it may take 2 months. So some journals will tell you in their journal's policy how long it will take. Some journals or editors will even tell you how long would a paper take in the review process by average. So they want to convince authors to submit their papers. But some journals, they may not spell out everything in their policy. It may take time. You can always write to the editor asking whether asking for the status of the paper. So when would the paper be accepted? Again, it depends. It depends whether the paper is going through 1 round review, 2 rounds of review, or 3 rounds of review. Some journal would not accept the paper if it goes beyond 3 rounds, 4 rounds of review. Eventually, decisions will be made or recommendations will be made by the reviewers, and editors will collect all these comments and their recommendations, and he or she or they will decide whether this paper is rejected or it requires resubmission and therefore revision, or it will be accepted as it is after first round, second round, or third round. It depends. So in general, this is how peer review process works. Now, if we go to the next slide, in general, there are 3 types of peer review: single blind peer review, double blind peer review, and even you have triple blind peer review. Essentially, the process, what is required, is similar. The difference is that when you look into single peer review, and when you look into double peer review, when you look into triple peer review, do you know who the editors are? Do you know who the reviewers are? So when we submit a paper to a journal, normally you would see double-blind peer review. What it means is the reviewers won't know who are the other reviewers. The reviewers won't know who the authors are. The authors won't know who the reviewers are. So this has been the predominant practice for many years. There are some exceptions, and also some journals begin to change, should I say, their business model, or the way peer review process is carried out. So what is important here to take note? Quality, your paper's relevance, your paper's quality must be there. And in order to avoid any bias, any conflict of interest, a certain rigor in peer review process must be ascertained. Okay, so in normal situations, you will see a lot of journals practicing double blind peer review. We have to be careful sometimes, because even though when we submit a paper and when the paper gets through editor's desk and when it is sent to the reviewers, either you are an author or you are a reviewer, we have to be careful. Sometimes authors are very clever, reviewers are very clever. For example, in your paper, you cite yourself a lot. Now, it doesn't mean when you cite a person a lot, you must be that person, but it is an indication that this paper could be from this particular person because he or she cites his or her papers a lot. These are things that you may want to avoid. As a reviewer, it is the same. When you provide comments, you can suggest what are the articles the authors can read, can refer to. If you recommend your papers everywhere, this is not a good practice as well. So it defeats the purpose of peer review process, even though on the surface we do the right thing, but in a more specific way, it is not a good practice to review too much who you are. Now, if we move on to the next slide, some journals, they move into open peer review, or some journals have been practicing open peer review. So this is another way of review process where it makes authors and reviewers known to one another. On one hand, we argue that blind peer review preserves the quality, the rigor, because it avoids bias, it avoids conflict of interest. On the other hand, there is another argument. In order to facilitate communication, learning and revising process, it is necessary to actually review who the authors and reviewers are. So you have to decide when you submit a paper to a journal, which peer review process it practices. For this particular webinar, I would not want to say which one is better, which one is superior. It all depends on the journal's policy. But of course, there are journals which you should avoid. There are journals which are blacklisted. There are journals which are branded as predatory journals, hijack journals. There are journals which you need to pay for publication, but you need to, again, read the journal's policy, why payment is necessary. Okay, some journals may require you to pay when you submit. Some journals will require you to pay when your paper is accepted. Some journals made it clear that this is not actually a payment. It is called article processing fees. In order to make your paper an open access, in other words, the ownership of the paper is transferred back to the authors. Therefore, you can download the paper, you can share the paper in any public domain. I will not again say which method is better. You as an author, you need to decide which is more suitable for your paper. Now, for Emerald Publishing, what I like is if you submit a paper and if the paper gets published, also if you review the paper, you will be rewarded with, I can't remember, 40 free downloads. I look at my Emerald account, I must have more than 1,000, more than 1,000 downloads, free downloads. So in a sense, the publisher encourages us to contribute to knowledge. It encourages to review, to contribute to this academic community, and we are rewarded with free downloads. So there are actually ways to download, to have access to all these articles without, so-called paying. Now, if we move on to another slide, I've more than 40 slides, but I need to finish everything in 1 hour. Okay, this is a statement by the Chief Executive Officer of Emerald Publishing, Vicky Williams. This is about another publishing method. Now, if we look at the next slide, this is what we call open research. Sorry, this is what Emerald calls open research. So it operates an open and post-publication peer review process. Again, the rigor, the relevance, the quality must never be compromised. Yet, this is another way to encourage authors to submit, to contribute, and to participate actively in the peer review process. If you look at the diagram, you submit, there will be pre-publication checks, then it will be published online, then you will have open peer review and user commenting. So for me, this is a good idea because many times researchers, I'm not sure how many students are there, and lecturers, we are pressurized, we are forced to publish because of key performance index. So we become fixated to number. We become fixated to publication rather than publishing. These two words are different. So we are more concerned about publication. How many papers are published? It's about number. When can it be published? When it is published, we fill up the form, we submit the number as if this paper is done. This publication is done, and we move on to the next paper. It should go beyond that. It should go beyond that. It should not be a mere number. It should be something that we contribute, something that we learn. And this is why open research can be another useful avenue for us to participate actively in peer review process, even after the paper is published, we can still get comments from the reviewers and even the readers. All right. Now, looking at this particular slide, why publish? What motivates me to publish? I have a lot of slides on this, but I need to keep it brief and short. One thing that drives me to publish is curiosity. And I'm curious about many things because I observe things. Example, I observe people taking selfie with their food. Before they eat their food, they take selfie, they take Wi-Fi. And if you look at the comments on the social media, this is the delicious food I ate yesterday, and someone will ask you, where is it? Why did you not invite me? Can I go with you? So from there, my friends, my colleagues, and I decided to write a paper about selfie as a promotion, and we compare selfie promotion with celebrity endorsement. Now we know if we use celebrity endorsement, you need a lot of money. You need to pay the celebrity to endorse your products. But selfie is free. People do it voluntarily, freely for the company, for the products, for the services they like. Can selfie be another promotion? If selfie is another promotion, is it as effective as celebrity endorsement? If the answer is yes, then this is a good news for many businesses, including small businesses. Even you don't have a strong capital, you can still compete in this age of social media. How to do it, why you should do it, I don't want to elaborate. You have the paper, you can read the paper. Okay, now I said earlier, I will only spend 10 minutes discussing with you about peer review process, what it is. If you have any questions, like what Mechelle said earlier, feel free to ask in the chat room. What I feel pressing is to discuss and share with you experience and process when you submit a paper to a journal, when you submit a paper for peer review process. We know the process is fairly standard, but our preparation is very, very important. And I would say, if you prepare well, peer review process is is a necessary process to ascertain, to endorse, to confirm what you do is recognized, is valid, and is useful for the academic or even the professional communities. So, what motivates you to publish? Okay, there are many reasons. Like I said, I want to get promoted. I want to fulfill my KPI. I want to be known, so on and so forth. Now, what is your primary motivation to publishing? If we look at this particular article by David Sherman, you don't really understand what you have discovered until you write it up. This is so true, so true. Now, I have many colleagues, juniors, and students who attend conference simply because they want their papers to be published. On one hand, it is perfectly fine. On the other hand, and I will explain in greater detail later, why we should do more than that. Publishing is not just, like I said, a matter of publication. It is actually a process where we learn things. If you go through number two and number three, this basically explains again why it is a learning process. By the way, the slides will be made available to you. So don't worry, I'm not going to cover everything, but hopefully the slides provide more information when you read. So why do you publish? Sorry, Mechelle, if you could go back to the earlier slide. What about this? To improve your skills in writing, argumentation, to satisfy your curiosity, passion, to network and make friends, to build progressive collaboration, to get connected with researchers, and to make a real impact on the real world. What about these reasons? If we take any of this as one of the drivers to write and publish, I believe publishing will be more than publication. I believe peer review process is just a process to testify that your work is a good work and it should be read by the communities, by the readers. Now, if we move on to the next slide, these are some experiences I would like to share with you. Why accepted, why rejected. We like to receive this type of email. It is a pleasure to accept your manuscript. Wow, you are so happy, correct? This is the email we like to receive. But let me tell you, excuse me, as many of my friends would say the same thing. If we were to include papers rejected by journals in our CV, that would occupy a lot of pages, a lot of pages. So if we move on to the next slide, I need to tell you, I won't say bad news, but you know, rejection happens. So if we are serious about writing, publishing, we have to accept that rejection is part of the process. So when I see this letter, when I saw this letter in 2016, I write you in regards to manuscript. Straight away, I know this is not a good news. If you look at the last paragraph, I realize this might seem unfair, but EJM receives many manuscripts per year, over 50. Whether this statement comforts you or not, I'm not sure. When I read, it comforted me a little bit. But on the other hand, I knew this is a template reply. Basically, what it says is my paper is not good enough, or my paper is not a good fit for this particular journal. Whatever it is, I will tell you it is not good to dwell in negative emotion. I'll explain why. If we move on to the next slide. Now, if we receive this reply where revision is required, where resubmission is welcome, it depends on the situation. I look at the letter. Reviewer 1, major. Reviewer 2, major. Reviewer 3, major. Reviewer 4, reject. Reviewer 5, reject. The authors, my colleagues and I decided to revise. We resubmitted. Guess what? As I mentioned here, good news. Eventually, the paper was accepted for publication. Okay, so this is a normal process. During peer review process, the reviewers will comment, they will recommend decision. Sometimes 2 reviewers. Sometimes it could be more than 2 reviewers. It could be 3, 4, 5. Sometimes when the first and second reviewer, their decisions contradict each other, the editor may invite another reviewer to provide comments. This is why if you look at Emerald Publishing, if you check your paper's status, let's say you check the paper status today, it is written waiting for reviewer score. Okay. After a few days, the status is changed. Instead of waiting for editor's decision, it goes back to review. It goes back to review. Okay. One of the reasons is the reviewers may have contradicting opinions, and as a result, the editor wants to invite another opinion. Okay, if we move on to the next slide, this is another, I don't know how to describe it. It was not fun in the process, but after it was done, you know, it was a huge relief. I received this email. Basically, sorry, there are two emails here. The first one, reviewer 1, major. Reviewer 2, 3, 4, reject, reject, reject. And the editorial decision is reject. I calculate the number of words. Based on the comments they provided, 3,200 words. So what would you do? This is the peer review process, and this is the outcome. Now, earlier I mentioned about emotion. When I saw this, I decided not to read the comments first. I knew the comments were long, and I was quite upset. Immediately in my mind, I asked myself why. I wanted to ask the editor and reviewers if they were in front of me why. I decided not to read. Let it go. Leave it there. Spend a few days doing something else. It could be 1 day, it could be 2 days, it could be 3 days, depending on how well you manage your emotion. Basically, I told myself, just accept it. If I read the comments on the spot, I read it with anger. I read it with frustration. After a few days, when I read the comments again, I read it with the attitude to learn. Even though I did not agree with all the comments, I must admit there are so many useful comments for us to learn. We can submit to other journal, and the same paper in another journal will go through peer review process again. Yet, with the revised manuscript, we can be sure that the paper will stand a better chance. Remember, reviewers are doing all this free for us. So we should be thankful, even if the paper is rejected, even though we are upset for a while, we need to take it as a learning process. Now, another experience, if you look at what is on the slide, it went through several rounds of review, 3 or 4 rounds. I could not remember exactly now. But what I want to point out here is you look at the comments given by the reviewers, 6,000 words. Second round of review, roughly 6,000 words. We revise the manuscript, we provide the response sheet. It's more than 15,000 words. It was not an easy experience. I mean, not an easy process, but it's good to have co-authors. We work together, we encourage one another, and we are so happy. We were so happy that the paper was eventually accepted. So peer review process does not only concern about accept and reject. It also concerns invitation to revise, to resubmit. So I told my friends, I told myself many times, if I receive an email from a journal, if the paper is not that's rejected, I will celebrate. At least a chance is given to us to revise and resubmit. Unless the comments are so serious, the paper is beyond repair, maybe that is because the paper is not a good fit to the journal. Some reviewers, they are very strict. Some reviewers, they tend not to reject. So a bit of luck is there. We cannot deny that. But if we do this regularly, things will be averaged out anyway. So you don't just submit a paper waiting for the decision. Keep writing, keep publishing. When a paper is submitted, another paper should be on its way. So things can happen, and it's not a good thing to complain. Of course, you can write an email to the editor to explain your disagreement, but never complain, never argue. And trust me, we are living in a very small world, even though we are all apart at the moment. Don't share your complaints on social media. Okay, don't say something like, "This is such a wonderful paper. The reviewers don't understand Southeast Asia at all. Why should he say this? Why should he say that?" And they, screenshot those statements on social media. I did not say whether it is right or wrong to do that. What I'm saying is I encourage you not to do that. But if you still want to do it, it is your decision. So anyway, if we move on to the next slide. By the way, the paper eventually was published. So apart from understanding how peer review process works, we now look at peer review process from another perspective. Why rejected? Why accepted? Why a paper is invited to be revised and resubmitted? Again, I cannot go through everything in detail, but these are some of them. Number one, the paper is not relevant to the journal's readers, so it will be desk rejected most likely, unless, as I said earlier, it is a predatory journal, it is a hijack journal, it is a journal that is more interested with your payment. So after you submit the paper, 2 weeks later, you receive an email. Congratulations, your paper is accepted without correction, or it is accepted subject to minor correction. Those minor corrections are basically formatting. So there is no correction on the content. If that is the case, I would strongly encourage you to avoid. It does not serve you justice in the long term. Number two, the paper does not make a contribution to new knowledge in the discipline or the application of knowledge. Some journals made it very clear at the journal's aims and scope and policy. They must see the advancement of theory, things like that. So if the paper is desk rejected, this could be the reason. Or during the peer review process, your paper may be recommended reject, and the editor decides to reject. This could also be the reason. The reviewers could not see anything new, anything novel in your paper. You may argue this is the first paper doing this, doing that. You may argue this paper contributes to theory methods. But when the reviewers read, what matters is how they feel. So this could be the reason your paper is desk rejected, or it is rejected during peer review process. The paper has glaring flaws in design and methods, and that compromises the rigor of research and the findings, the contribution of research. The paper does not meet established ethical standards. For example, plagiarism. Be careful with this. All right. Number five, the paper is poorly written. Even though how should I put it? Even though this is not an English lesson, if we submit a paper where the title has grammatical errors, abstract has grammatical errors, it makes the paper very difficult to read. And the editor or the reviewers will have no choice but to reject. Now, editor would likely reject. The reason is because not only what I said earlier, the aims, the scope, the quality. Apart from that, we need to realize reviewers work for these journals for free. They do not have time always. So editors do not want to send papers which reviewers do not find rewarding when they review. So they may have to reject at the outset. The paper has not been prepared according to the journal's guidelines for presentation. The paper is not revised according to the comments given by reviewers and or editors. This is very, very important. I will explain this later. The paper does not meet the required quality of the journal editors. And in general, I would say don't be obsessed with impact factor. Yes, it is important. Don't be obsessed with it. Try, the journal that you can aim at. Try journal that is in your field, because you need more readers in your field to know about your work. It could be 1.5. Then, impact factor 1.5. Why should you aim impact factor 7.9? Is it because you want to win a prize? Is it because you want to be recognized as the best researcher in your university? Again, nothing wrong with that. You have to see beyond publication. You want readers to acknowledge you, to know who you are, and to know your work. And work on your paper, and slowly, surely, you can do better. You can become better, and you can target, better journals in the near future. Now, if we move on to the next slide, how to get accepted and published and avoid being rejected. Now, these are not formula. I need to make it clear. I'm glad that this is recorded. These are not formula. And I must also say, I'm not publication expert. I'm no publishing expert. I'm just a learner, and I'm still learning today. And this is why earlier, on the earlier slide, I actually started writing and publishing in 2014. My first paper was published in 2014. And that will come later. Anyway, let me tell you first. I was so ambitious. I submitted my first paper to journal, which is indexed in SSCI. At that time, it was called ISI. So it was rejected. I submitted to another journal, ISI, rejected. 3 times, 4 times, 5th, 6th, 7th. I submitted to 7 journals. After it was rejected one after another, eventually I gave up. I submitted to a peer-reviewed journal, even though it was not indexed. Eventually, it was published. I felt happy. I celebrated. At least it built my confidence. And then slowly, I moved on to better journals. I only started in 2014. I know this sounds like a cliche, but I want to say this. If I started late, and if I could do what I'm doing now, I'm sure all of us can. It's all about preparation. It's all about persistence. It's all about working together with authors, with editors, with reviewers in the process to make your writing and publishing better. Now, if we go through this slide, they are basically self-explanatory. Choose the right journal, read the aims and scope. I received papers, not knowing what the journal is about. They just want to try their luck, and they ask me how much it is. How long would it take to publish? This gives me, the editor, a very bad impression about this person. Like, he does not read. So my email could be one of, I don't know, 100 emails he or she sent. So make sure you know the journal that you are targeting at. Read. Communicating with the editors about your idea before submitting. No harm to try. Write an email to the editor. Tell him or her what you have in mind and you intend to submit this paper. Would this paper be of relevance to your journal? No harm to try, but it's good to try all the time and to get the reply. Number 3, clear positioning. What is the paper about? What does the paper want to tell? Okay, well-written abstract and introduction. First impression is always important. Okay, abstract and your introduction. I read many papers where the first sentence of the introduction bores me. Okay, to give the authors the benefit of doubt, I read, but usually my first impression is quite accurate. I read, and after 1 or 2 paragraphs, I decide this is not a good. All right. Next point: good English without being complex. Sorry,
Webinar.
good English without being complex. Flow and clarity are necessary. An effective cover letter. Follow the recommendation of the reviewers. Respond to every comment. You can disagree, but you must justify in a proper way. Don't write, as I mentioned earlier, this has already been discussed. Don't write something like that. When the reviewers review your papers again, we want to make their life as easy as possible. Respond to every comment, provide every justification, agree why, disagree why, provide your evidence, make their life easier so that it will facilitate their decision making, hopefully favorable decision making. Okay, Work with other researchers who can compensate your weaknesses. Now, there are people who told me, my English is bad. And one time, one English teacher, one English lecturer told me, I want to publish, but in our center, we are more like a service center. We don't really emphasize on publication, but I want to publish. What I have in mind is, why not researchers who are not good at English and those English lecturers, they just work together. They just work together. Yes, you can send your paper for proofreading, for editing. Make sure you send to a good one. There are many ways you can work with another people to compensate one another's weaknesses. So I work with Australian, for example. So we work together. He or she went through the whole thing, revised whatever necessary. Guess what? I don't have to send my paper to proofreading anymore, because I have an author who is good in English. So there are many ways to do things together, to compensate one another, to complement one another, so that your paper stand a better chance during the peer review process. Anyway, a lot can be said. These are some of the things you can consider in your writing and publishing. Next slide, please. I know I'm running out of time. What time is it now? Okay, roughly 50 minutes. Okay, which journal to target? Again, these are just suggestions because it depends on many, many situations. Please don't take this slide and tell everyone in the world this is the commandment from Hiram. It is not, all right? It depends on your situation. Number one, choose the journal that suits your discipline and area of research. And number two, communicate with the editors about your idea before submitting. This is what I said earlier. All this can be done easily. It is within our control. Yes, peer review process, we don't know what will happen because we don't know, who are the reviewers that our paper is assigned to. Yet there are things we can actually prepare and do well. I do this many times. I wrote an email to an expert, and I sent him my abstract. He replied politely, "This paper is interesting. However, it is not within his area, and he is busy, and therefore, he politely declined. Yet you can look into this paper and that paper." Now, even though my invitation is rejected, at least he knows me now, and at least he provides additional resources. So after 2 years, I sent him another invitation and another draft. Would you be so kind to read the paper if this is of your interest, and maybe we can work together? Guess what? He read, he replied, he is very interested to work with this, to work on this paper with me. Okay, so he became a co-author. Now this person is one of my good friends. He's currently in Australia. So things can happen. When he rejected me, if I took it personally, what benefits I would get. So work on your homework. You can always get better. You can always approach the same editors, the same journals again. Now, the rest, as I said, it depends. Number three, submit to a peer-reviewed journal by an established publisher to build your confidence. For example, Emerald Publishing. Not every journal is indexed in Scopus, SSCI, but these journals are credible because it is published by a credible publisher. Number four, submit to a journal which issues call for papers, special issues. If these special issues is relevant to your area, then you can try. Okay. Number five, submit to a journal which publishes more frequently, 6 to 12 issues per year. For example, you may want to try British Food Journal. It is no guarantee that your paper will get accepted and published easily. Yet, this journal publishes 12 issues per year. So you will get the decision earlier, okay, because of the amount of papers they receive they review, and they publish. Number 6, submit to a journal which specializes in an area that you are working on, can work on. Example, there is a journal called Journal of Ethnic Foods. Journal of Ethnic Foods. If you are doing something on, I don't know, if you are from the Philippines, Mindanao food, balut, correct? Anyway, you can look at the papers published in these journals, and you will get a good idea how you can draft your paper. You can try. When I submitted the paper a few years ago, it was accepted for publication after 3 days. But they also require revision. The reason is, even though my paper is not ready to be published yet, they are interested in the content of the paper. They never realize about this particular food. They like to have this paper in their collection. That's why the decision is to accept, but you have to do a bit of revision. So maybe this is a journal. There are many other journals you can try because of the specific area they are looking at. Number 7, a journal which provides a friendly policy. Example, there is a journal called the Qualitative Report, TQR. Example, in this journal, if you read the journal policy, it is stated there by the editor, they will try not to reject your paper. They will still give you chance. Unless you give up, unless you don't revise, then they will have to reject. So at the beginning, they will try not to reject any paper submitted to the journal. So more friendly policy, something that you can work on. Submit to a journal which accepts different types of paper. If you are not comfortable with research paper, empirical paper, you can write case study, you can write book review, you can write short letter, you can write perspectives. It all depends on the journal. Some journals accept different types of paper. Number 9, submit to a journal whose editor is someone you can meet and talk to at the conference. This is why I said earlier, don't just attend a conference for the sake of publication. Talk to the editors, talk to the delegates, talk to those people. Who knows, they could be your reviewers. Even though blind review, at least you know one another, you can work with one another, especially editors. Select conferences where you will meet editors. No doubt you want to select conference because it is held in Bangkok, Manila, Bali. You can go shopping. I don't take nothing away from all this, but make sure it is also a good conference where you can meet editors. Okay, submit a journal which your co-author is familiar with. If you work with someone, always work with, you can always check with him or her if he or she knows certain journals, editors, editorial board members better. Because if they know the journal better, at least they can prepare the paper in a better way. The chances will be much, much higher. No guarantee, but the chance will be higher. Next slide, please. Okay, what I want to say, and I hope this is an encouragement, a word of motivation to all of you, and that is failure is an option. It's all about how we learn in the process, how we pick up ourselves from failure and we rise above the occasion and we can do better in the process. This is a story by the Iron Lady in Pakistan. I will skip that. You can read her story. If we move on to the next slide, every paper has its own story. So like I said, my first paper was rejected 7 times. I was too ambitious. Eventually, I was happy to submit a paper to a peer-reviewed journal. I only started in 2014. Finger crossed, hopefully this weekend, my citation based on Google Scholar citation will exceed 3,000. So it is more than just the number of your publication. It's also about your work, whether it makes an impact on the research community and hopefully on the practical side as well. If we move on to the next slide, now I need to be quick. These are things you can read because it tells you some of the experiences accumulated by past researchers. So the thing here is you should always start early. How early is it? Early means today. Early means this week. Early doesn't mean your age. Early means today. All right. Let's move on to the next slide. What else? What has been found? Some people said, I'm very busy. I'm bogged down by admin work. Let me tell you, there are many articles, including this one. If you see the arrow, survey indicates that academicians who write have no more free time or no fewer commitments to social action than colleagues who do not write. So, ladies and gentlemen, there should be no excuse. What makes them different, if we look at the last sentence, is that they manage their time better, and they do not get distracted easily compared to others. It's not about your admin work. It's not about your commitment. I understand. I sympathize. Different people, different situations. Yet, in general, it should not be our excuse for not writing, for not getting the papers published. Okay, if we move on to the next slide, more sharing by past researchers. Next slide, please. So these are some of the reasons why researchers fail in terms of publishing. Early failure, earlier experience you failed before, and that become a traumatic experience to you, and therefore you do not want to try it again, or you want to be perfect. So all this you have to put aside. Okay, peer review process may not be may not be perfect as well. Sometimes certain flaws get away as well because of reviewers. Some are lenient, some are not good at statistical analysis, some are less familiar with qualitative approach. Things may happen, but like I said, we still have to do our homework and prepare the best possible to submit our paper to a journal. Now, this is another finding. What I want to say is the last one. University, how prestigious are your universities have little correlation to your publishing success. You may be from Harvard, you may be from Oxford, I may be from a local university. It does not determine whether your publishing is a success or not. So for us, it is a good story. Sorry, it is a good news. How we work with others will determine our publication experience, our publication success. Let's move on to the next slide. Now, this is something I will not want to say too much. This is not the platform. However, I put it there for your reference. In order for academics, for researchers to be productive in research, in publication, there must be an enabling environment. Okay, do you have an enabling environment? Okay, I rest my case. I don't want to say too much. In some situation, you have to create that environment yourself. You know you don't have it. You have to create it yourself. You need an environment, a conducive environment for you to write and to publish. Like I said earlier, we cannot control peer review process, but these are things that we can do, we can manage, so that peer review process will be just a matter of time to know when the paper is accepted for publication. I've been maybe too optimistic here, but it's important that we try and we do what we can, and don't be too worried about things that we cannot control. Now, for this particular slide, if you click again, the key is write. If you ask me what is the secret to publishing, the only secret to publishing is write. Okay, so if you want if we want to have a good peer review process, make sure our writing improves as well. If you look at the last sentence in the blue box, what I would suggest to you is not only you read the paper to support your study, you also read some good papers in order to learn to write. I hope you get the point. Many times we read the papers because we need some citations, we need something to support. It is also important that we read some papers, we choose a few good papers, we read them in order to learn writing. Learn from the authors how to write, how to argue, use that techniques. Of course, you need to paraphrase, you need to use your own voice. But if we do that, consistently, I believe our writing would improve. Many times, our content is good, but our writing does not do our content justice. Our writing is not able to exemplify, articulate the idea, the content. So this is something that we have to work on continuously. So one way is read good articles for the sake of learning writing. Next slide, please. So writing is the key. Writing is the secret right today. All right. I will leave this to you. If you are a newbie, beginner, achiever, contributor, veteran, again, these are only suggestions. What you can do to build up your confidence in writing, to write better, again, like I said, to ensure the peer review process would be a smoother one. We move on to the next slide, please. Recommendation of some publishing tactics. Okay, I need to finish in the next 5 minutes. Number one, the secret to writing is to write. Full stop. Number two, set your time and even venue. This is what I mentioned earlier, and an enabling environment. If your institution does not provide you that, you have to create one for yourself. Writing requires discipline, then only inspiration. Discipline is a must. Someone said this before, and I agree totally. Getting a PhD is not about how smart you are, it's more about how disciplined you are. Number three, start early. Okay, you can read the rest. Number four, use some good articles as your main reference. The articles from the journal that you are targeting at. Number five, identify your idea. What story you want to tell. Okay, so if not, your article will appear, messy, disorganized. Number six, utilize online resources. Number seven, practice doing something small first to build your confidence. Listen to suggestions, listen to criticism. Okay, if you cannot take it immediately, like I said, go away, do something else, and come back stronger and listen for the sake of learning. Work with someone experienced, work as a team. Like I said, you can compensate one another's weaknesses, you can complement one another. Keep the editors and reviewers in mind. Know the experts in your area, write to them, no harm to try. And number 11, celebrate any success. If my paper is sent to peer review process, I will celebrate. At least it is not just rejected. Sorry, I could not elaborate all this, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Let's move on to the next slide. I need to finish soon. So don't be obsessed with all this. But I believe if we do things in the right way, sooner or later, getting our papers published in journals, indexed in Scopus and SSCI, SCIE, ESCI, there are so many ranking indices out there. It will naturally come. Okay, peer review process is a process for us to learn. It's a process to make our work more credible, more relevant to the international community. Why not? This is the purpose, apart from just fulfilling our publication KPI. We move on to the next slide. I think I need to finish. Other recommendation, There are many ways, but I will only talk about the first, the second, and the third. We move on to the next slide. One way to learn about peer review process is to nominate yourself, to volunteer yourself to be in the peer review process where you can review other papers. Again, no harm to try. Write an email to the editor, volunteer, nominate yourself as a reviewer. So when you review others' paper, you will need to do well because you need to perform well. So this is one example, British Food Journal, where I began as an ad hoc reviewer to becoming an editorial board member in the journal. Another example is Young Consumer. I began with this journal as an author where my paper was rejected. I began from there. And now I am the associate editor of this journal in a span of, I don't know, maybe 4 years. 4 years. This is not about, I'm not suggesting that, you all must do this and why I'm so capable. Nothing, okay, on that. Like I said, it is a process where we can learn. Our failure, our mistake can be a great source of motivation for us to do better. So instead of, apart from sending paper and the paper is sent to peer review, why not nominate yourself as a reviewer to go through all this peer review process? It will be a rewarding experience. Trust me. Next slide, please. Also, work with different people. Work with different people. Mechelle, said earlier, I won Emerald Literary Award in 2018. Let me say this. I said it many times before. It is no shame. It is no shame to tell all of you that I would not have done it alone. Okay. Fortunately, and gladfully, I work with my colleagues, and together we achieve this milestone. So when you attend a conference, when you write an email to an editor, when you talk to other researchers, your colleagues, build your network, work together as a team. I'm working with researchers in other countries in Southeast Asia. It will be impossible for me to collect data in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in the Philippines, but this matter becomes so much easier when you work with researchers in other countries. So that's how you compensate or complement one another to get things done. And when you submit a paper, a cross-border study, 3 countries, 4 countries, if this paper is well written, I believe many editors will be interested because it is a paper with huge contribution. It is not limited to one population. It is a cross-border study. Okay, I did this many times. Of course, the paper must be well written. If you focus on strategy too much, then and you lose sight on the quality, this is no good. All right. So do something that editors like. Do something that the journals like. Know the editor. Know the journals. Okay, I must finish. Final thought. Why publish? Okay, so peer review process. Even though we can't do much, it all depends on our writing, and also how we position our paper to make a contribution to knowledge in that particular discipline. Moving on to the next slide. I believe it should be the last one. Next slide, please. Not moving, huh? Okay. Actually, there is another slide. Mechelle, would it be okay to go 2 slides backward? This is the one. Okay, I don't want to tell too much story now. The idea here is when you feed the fish, you are actually feeding the water as well. If you are too fixated to feeding the fish, you forget about the quality of the water, eventually it will kill the fish. I hope you get the story. Huh? Yes, publication is important. If you only focus on publication without looking into learning, looking into networking, looking into writing, you will lose the big picture. Okay, moving on to the last slide, I suppose. This is what I would like to conclude. Okay, publishing is about planning, positioning, progressing, and practicing. Writing and publishing requires continual learning and practice, and it has to start today, not tomorrow. What if tomorrow never comes? Well, that sounds bad, but anyway, let's do it every day. Seeing publishing beyond publication. This is what I said earlier. Oops. Before that, Mechelle, and before that, I have not finished. Yep. Before that, rejection is part of the process. So learn in the process. Now, the next point, being passionate in your work and work together work with others. Finally, have fun in your writing and publishing journey. All right. I hope you find the sharing useful. I know there is a slide on many babies, toddlers. That is to show you, don't get discouraged. Just do it, and I'm sure you will get better over time. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Hiram. That's really a lot of information, very insightful, straightforward, and concrete. So I know that there are a lot of you guys already posted questions. So since we do have limited time, I need to pick selected questions only. So the first question is from Jose Angelo Lorenzo. When we communicate with the editors about our paper, even when it is not yet finished, is it all right to submit the initial draft, or do we only submit the proposal of the paper first?
Thank you for the question. Everything is doable. Everything is doable. No harm to try. So what I'm doing, I will write to the editor when the paper is done. I also write to the editor when it is not fully completed yet. So no harm to try. And like I said, it is not just about publication. It's also good to know the editor through email. So why not?
Okay, thank you. Another question from Van Tien. My manuscript have 3 reviewers, 2 minor revision and 1 rejected. Editor gave his final decision rejected. Could you please explain that case?
Yes, that could happen. That could happen. It could be due to the fact that the comments by the third reviewer are really critical, and editor agrees with it. The first 2 reviewers, for some reason, overlook certain aspects. That could be one reason. Another reason, the third reviewer could be the associate editor or area editor. So he or she is the gatekeeper because he or she knows the area better than the editor in chief, and therefore the editor in chief has to agree with the third reviewer. I can only give you 2 reasons at the moment due to time constraint. There could be other reasons. We just have to move on. Sometimes things like this happen. By the way, can I say one more thing? I have a paper, in fact, 2 or 3 papers rejected 2 or 3 times before. Eventually, after revision, these papers end up published with better journals. So blessing in disguise.
All right, thank you. I think that answered his question, Dr. Hiram. Another question from Mumtaz Aini Alive. I don't pronounce it right. Is it okay if we want to withdraw our paper after we submitted for a certain period of time and no response from the journal? The waiting period is so long, almost 2 years. If okay, what is the best duration that we should wait before we want to do it again?
Thank you for the question. I understand the frustration. My
Yeah.
simple response would be withdraw. Just withdraw. At least we write an email. If the editor did not reply, I don't see a reason for you to hang on there. Just withdraw and submit elsewhere. At least you write the paper and you indicate your intention to withdraw. There should be no ethical issue.
Okay, thank you. Another question from the Philippines, from Avi Iragan, and she said that balut is really good in the Philippines. Dr. Hiram, I can attest to that. Anyway, her question is, may I ask the topic or phenomenon you are currently researching, and how will it contribute to the general community?
This is a very broad question. It all depends on which journal you are submitting to, what are the journal's policy. If the journal emphasizes more on theory, then it has to be, your paper has to advance knowledge in that particular discipline. If the journal welcomes practitioners, papers like perspectives, policy, viewpoints, um, you can write a paper in a more practical way. So the positioning and contribution of the paper really depends on what the journal wants. I don't know whether if I answer the questions, but that is my response to the question at the moment.
Okay, that's great. Another question from Nazatosh Shimar. How do we know about the journal is more friendly? How to check and how to communicate with editor before we submit?
Hello. Okay.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I think I lose the connection a bit.
Okay.
Can you hear me
Let
now?
Yes, I can hear you. I will read
Okay.
it again.
Okay,
Do you
thank
want me
you.
to read it? Okay. Question.
No, if I
Okay, sorry.
sorry, Michelle. Sorry,
Do
Michelle.
you want me to read it again?
Like I said earlier, you can read the journal's policy. And this is number one. Number two, you can always ask your friends, your colleagues who have had experience with certain journals. So in short, these are the two things you can do in order to know whether this journal has a friendlier policy. Again, it is not necessarily the case, but these are the things that you can do at least to give you a better chance.
Right, right. I'm sorry, I have to pick last two questions because we do have limited time here. So another question from Mr. Melbert Libuan. Is it okay if you presented your paper on an international platform but declined to publish it, preferring instead to present your research work to a separate international organization? Plus, what is the best way to apply a theory to a given research study?
The last part of the question is again a huge one. I might not want to elaborate too much. My apology to the participant. Now, if you submit a paper to a conference, you can always request the conference organizer to not publish your paper as a proceeding. It is your right. It is your right, unless there is a statement in the conference policy that every submission will be published as proceeding. If not, it is always your right to request that your paper be withdrawn after presentation because you want to publish your paper elsewhere in a journal. Now, if you want to use the same paper and present in another conference, I would suggest don't present, don't do some revision. When you receive comments, improve on the paper. So it will not be similar. Many conferences they will publish the abstracts. So if the abstracts are similar, and if they are published on any online domain, it does not look good on you because some people, some busybody people will pick up all these things, and then they may start to query, why are you presenting the same thing in different conferences, things like that. So on one hand, yes, you can withdraw. On the other hand, if you present in elsewhere, if you publish your working paper as a manuscript in another journal, make sure you revise. Some journal requires 20%, 30% similarity. The rest should be different. So again, you have to check with the journal's editor.
Okay, I believe that answered his question perfectly. One last question, Dr. Hiram, from Amara Singh. Let's say in a double-blind peer review, each reviewers gave me contrasting comment. Say one of them said remove the data, while others says the data provides sufficient information. How should the author solve this, and how does the editor gauge the strength of the paper if need to be resubmitted? If it's accepted with revision or rejected.
Just throw a dice and see how it is. No. Okay. You have to take side. You have to take side. It's a challenge to please everyone. Even though the paper went through peer review process, this is still your paper. So go through their comments. If you are in agreement with the comments by the first reviewer, then you do the necessary revision. You provide your response. You provide your revision. For reviewer number 2, you have to then defend why you do things in a certain way, and you need to provide justification. Don't argue, don't complain, justify in a polite way. What I did sometimes, I agree his comment, her comment as well, but I just could not include it because it is different from another reviewer's comment. So what I will do is I acknowledge his or her comment. I will include this example on here. I will include this as the limitation and the future studies as in my conclusion. So this is something that I can look into for my future study. So I still maintain what it is. I disagree, with the comment, but I don't argue. I don't tell him or her I disagree. I provide my justification why I keep it as it is or why I review in a certain way. Yet we acknowledge that this is a good suggestion, and we will include this in our future study for future investigation. Editor, some editors are very hardworking. They read everything, including comments. Some editors, I'm not saying that they are not hardworking, but they have faith in reviewers' comments, reviewers' recommendation. So in many situations, editor may not meddle into this situation. As long as we can fulfill the requirements of 2 or 3 reviewers, then you should be fine. Okay, and also, Emerald Publishing has a lot of online resources. Do spend time reading all these resources on how to review, how to address comments.
Okay, that's a great answer, Dr. Hiram. I know I've encountered that questions many times, and you answered it perfectly. And I'm pretty sure that the one who questioned that fulfilled your answer. So I do apologize. We do have a limited time to answer all the questions, and I'll do the best that I can. All of these questions that left unanswered to relay it to Dr. Hiram to get an answer from him. So I think this would be the end of this webinar. But before I will let you go, I just want to quote Dr. Hiram. He mentioned earlier that failure is really an option. It's really part of the process. Even in a personal life, there's a lot of failures, right? If you choose to give up, you are just choosing your destination to fail. And I just want to quote also Benjamin Franklin. He says that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So it just basically means that success doesn't come accidentally. It comes with effort, determination, and proper planning for you to reach your destination, which is success or acceptance of your paper. Because I know, human as we are, we get angry. We tend to sometimes argue with a reviewer about the negative criticism. Human as we are, that's really our first reaction. But embrace it in a positive way, because from the mistakes we learned, your paper will get better and better from the revisions, right? So if you receive feedback and revisions, it means that you had a chance. It's like a step closer to acceptance, to get your paper accepted. So I just want to close this by saying, don't lose hope, don't give up. Okay, so I would like to thank you, Dr. Hiram Tang, for giving his wonderful insight and knowledge. This could have been put up successfully without his kind and generosity to acceptance to speak to us today. And thank you so much for all of your participation. This is me once again, Mechelle. I'm the business manager of Emerald Publishing based in the Philippines. Wishing you all the best and see you in our future webinars. Stay safe and good luck.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.